Ramp is one of the oldest strategies in the game, and is one of the decks that keeps evolving, and you can find it in any form. USA is the nation that provides the most Ramp cards, and numerous main and ally combinations can be used to make a Ramp deck. Although USA Britain Ramp has been the traditional Ramp deck, over the last few months the reverse version of Britain USA has proven to be slightly more resilient to aggro, due to the high value cards such as Monty and Kitty Hawk. Other nations involved in ramp strategies might be Soviets and Poland. However, given the deck's severe weakness to aggressive and fastly growing decks, its popularity and efficiency have dropped in the last months. But it is still a deck that is ready to punish any opponent who isn't ready or fast enough. The key cards in the deck are War Machine, Carpet Bombing, and Seaforth Highlanders. Soviet Control has also seen a drop in popularity. It used to be a deck that could very decently hold its ground against the terrorizing fast Heinz deck of the previous months, but the current top tier decks can outpace it easier and are less weak to Confusion, the traditional aggro punishing card. But the Soviets have a good curve, high value cards, and an all-around collection of almost all important abilities in the game, and they do remain a strong control deck. The most popular allies are Italy and Britain, each providing with different aspects such as hard removal or AoE, which help the Soviets survive the early and mid game. And if that happens, the all-time great Soviet elites take the ground to finish off opponents, either with hard battle or with burn damage. The key cards in the deck are the 845th Rifles, Partisans, and the 1st Rifles. Resistance is another deck that has seen better days, but is still here, trying to mess with the opponent's hands and their heads. For the last months, the meta has been just one bit too fast for Resistance to be able to consistently keep up with. But a slow start could be all that is needed to have unit after unit die from AoE, see your cards being milled from overdraw, and of course, see your own HQ's health go down bit by bit all the way down to 0. It is worth noting that some of the decks that used to give Resistance a very hard time, such as Britain Ramp or Mare Nostrum, healing decks are now much less popular, thus giving the Resistance the required breathing room to be persistently present in the meta. The key cards in the deck are KI-183, Long Range Recon, and Tora Tora Tora. Unlike the decks in the lower tier rank, German Control has seen its popularity steadily rising and now has a solid presence on the ladder. There are a number of different options to play the deck, focusing on discard or board control, with Italy being a slightly more popular ally than Britain. Its access to countermeasures is also important to slow down unexpectedly the decks that are early aggressive, and with cards like Flampanzer and Tactical Strike, they can continue their control to the mid game. After that, they rely on their powerful late game units such as the Leopold or the Panther G to finish off their opponents. The key cards in this deck are Leopold, Flampanzer, and heals such as Mare Nostrum or Fortifications. One of the most interesting decks on the list, both for the way it's played and for its placement in this tier rank, USA Germany Tempo deck emerged with the release of Bolster the Ranks almost a year ago, and has been coming back and forth on the highest ranks of the ladder. It is the only deck analyzed today that is close enough to be mid-range, and it doesn't have any particularly bad or good matchup. As the name suggests, it relies on tempo with blitz units and bouncing effects, and it can go toe-to-toe with any deck. But at the same time, due to having units which are more expensive to deploy and operate than traditional aggro, it can be controlled even by much slower decks like Ramp. It doesn't have any card that is particularly too strong, making it easy to be ignored in balance patches, and thus remains overall a good, solid deck, consistently present in the competitive scene. The key cards for this deck are the 32nd Infantry Regiment, the 99th Infantry, and M4 Sherman. Historically speaking, Jaggro is the most popular deck of all time among players. There have been very few and specific periods in the game where Jaggro struggled so hard that it couldn't be competitive. This isn't one of those though. Builds based on Feigned Retreat have returned, and Jaggro's explosiveness is capable of taking out any opponent as it always has been. More specifically, those builds have very few orders to make Feigned Retreat as reliable as possible, and the constant refilling of the hand with units, together with Signal Regiment, make it easy to overthrow the opponents with massive boards and burn damage. Of course, the traditional way of winning, with early unit pressure and burn damage from Maito and the orders, is always there as well. Jaggro might be the most popular deck on the ladder, but it struggles and is inherently disadvantaged against the two main decks of the Tier 1 rank. The key cards in this deck are Feigned Retreat and Enigma, Arado for drawing key orders, and First Signal. The past 1 year has been really rough for Alpine. Being slow, non-blitz infantry units kept them several tiers away from the competitive scene. However, the introduction of Gebirgspioneer 95 and the buff to Obese were enough to put them in the highest level of the competitive scene. Those two really speed up the deck either in the early or mid game, and it is now very capable of pulling explosive turns of flooding the board with massively buffed units. Those Alpine units grow and grow until they are very quickly out of range of AoE or standard removal, and they can also take care of guards efficiently. On top of that, they can utilize the aggression of cards such as Panzer 35T and Encirclement, and when things get tough, there's always a Leopold to turn them around. The key cards in this deck include Gebirgspioneer 95, Encirclement, any and all Alpine units, and Obese. The final deck of today is another one with a large tradition in the game. Brit Air always comes in pairs with any aggro deck of the meta, ready to punish it with its long range and early removal such as air superiority. In fact, the main reason Brit Air is so popular these days is the dominance of Alpine. The air deck can be too fast for the Alpine to catch up, even with the extra speed of Obese. On top of that, having abilities such AoE with Empire Strikes or Fury with the Hurricane leaves them very little breathing room and makes comebacks easier. Brit Air also has a good matchup with many other of the decks of this list, such as Jaggro or Resistance, but it's easier to be controlled by Germany, Britain, or Soviets. Key cards for this deck are Close Air Support, Swordfish, Gladiator, and Hurricane. Special thanks to Team Eastern Front for helping compile this month's meta reports. For more meta reports and exclusive interviews, make sure to subscribe to Kards War Room.